Hello, this is the Porgcorner with your hosts Mark and Steven. We talk comics, film, books, television, science, aliens, and gaming. We come from different nerddom. Steven lives and breathes Star Wars, and I'm a Superman and DC fanatic. We also touch on the Marvel Universe and other sci-fi and fantasy franchises. Now, let's get to episode 6, Meet the Porgs. In the intro that we've been using for the last 5 episodes, we've described ourselves as you as a Star Wars fanatic and me as a DC and Superman fanatic. I thought today's episode we would kind of talk about our history with these franchises, how we got into them as fans and why we love them so much. Just so the audience can kind of get to know us and our backgrounds, and maybe they'll connect with some of the things that we mentioned. So I kind of want to ask you with Star Wars, and I don't think we've ever talked about why you love it.
No, we've never sat down and had this conversation.
Yeah, so, why Star Wars? What was it about that appealed to you as a kid?
So it's kind of an origins thing for me. Star Wars, I was brought into Star Wars by my older brother. He's 5 years older than me. So he was born in 1981, and so his entire, his life, Star Wars was being made, and so for him, things were fresh and new, and then he had an opportunity to share those with me when I was a kid. On top of that, he also collected the Star Wars toys. So we spent a lot of time traveling around, going to comic book conventions and toy shows, trying to find those hard specialty toys. Right. We've quite a collection.
Okay, I haven't seen the collection, but it's back home.
It's back at home, yeah.
All right, so do you have a first memory of watching the movies themselves? Because obviously the first one came out in 77, right?
Yeah.
1977?
Right.
And you were born 86?
Yeah.
So, do you remember, were you 4 years old and you watched it? How did that...
I don't remember how old I was, but I believe the first time I ever sat down and watched all 3 movies and knew what I was watching because my brother was explaining it to me as it went.
That's really not annoying at all.
No, not explaining it as you go, but you're a little kid, you don't understand things, and maybe you have questions. And I had my older brother to give me that opportunity. Right. He was able to explain things I had questions about. Right. It's not called lifesavers. They're lightsabers. Ah,
that's a key thing right there. Very confusing.
A lot of kids call them lifesavers.
I actually have never heard that in my life, but...
I called them that for a while. As a small child, you hear it. You hear things different.
He still does, actually.
Yeah. So the first time I actually sat down and watched the movies, my brother had a best friend who didn't live near us. I think he lived in another city. So my parents actually took both of us, dropped us off, and we had, a long weekend at their house, which was obviously a lot of fun. But one of the things we did is we sat down and watched the original trilogy.
Oh, straight through.
Through the weekend.
Through the weekend,
as kids do for sleepovers.
Yeah.
We also watched Dune,
which
is a really cool movie, but real hard to understand if you're under 10 years old.
I still don't understand it.
Yeah, and the new one's coming out, so we're going to have to go over that.
That's true. That's a movie to review later,
Yeah.
So that was your, basically a long weekend with friends.
Yeah.
Watching all of this.
Right. That was the first time that I understood it. And, cause not only that, but, both my brother and his friend had the toys, so we were able to play. We would, we'd stop the movie and we'd go play the action. We'd recreate the scene almost with the toys that we had.
That's cool. Yeah. With Star Wars, for me, obviously I'm not a super fan like you. Honestly, the first time I watched it, A New Hope, my dad sat me down. We had one of those old, tube TVs from the 90s. Sure. And it was our first color one. Oh. And he was like, "Oh, you got to watch this." I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And he really hyped it up. It's grand epic, and, it's one of my favorite movies and all that stuff. And at that point, I was already, big into superheroes, like Superman and stuff. So I watched it, and New Hope kind of bored me. I know some people are going to kill me. You're giving me a death stare right now. And to this day, for me, out of the original trilogy, it's actually my least favorite. I like Empire and Return a lot more than A New Hope. I felt like those kicked it up a notch. And maybe it was just, I don't know, when I was a kid, not having all that action really stuck with me in the first one. Because the first one, it starts kind of slow pace,
Yeah, I mean, it it's the beginning. It tells the origin of it. You know, it's where it starts. So
that's exactly right. Like, sorry, not to interrupt, but like that's exactly like the problem that some people have with superhero origin stories, right?
Yeah.
Once you've seen one, you feel like you've seen them all, and they're kind of like tedious at this point.
Right.
That's kind of the feeling I had about it.
But you were 4 or 5. How did you even know about origin stories? But I understand a 4 or 5-year-old can just be bored with the entertainment level that somebody else might understand. Like, your dad, an adult, understood the elements of what made the movie great at the time.
Right.
You know, because for me, like, A New Hope could not go at the bottom of any list ever. Because it's the origin of Star Wars, not just in the sense of where the characters come from, but without that movie, without that low-budget production company finally saying yes and them filming everything in Great Britain instead of America because they didn't have the money for it, like, we would have no Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and you know, one element to kind of backtrack on what I said about a little bit is, so, again, I came from previous movie experience. I was 4 or 5 or whatever, but again, was familiar with superheroes. I'd seen some of the Superman films and all this stuff. Star Wars laid a foundation for a new type of film. Like, it's revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
When it was made.
Right.
And so by the time I'm 4 or 5 in the 90s watching this movie, like, all these other films I had seen from, like, the 80s built on that legacy of Star Wars.
Right. The revolution.
Which I wouldn't understand.
Everything's building off the revolution. Yes, and I get that completely, too, because, you know, same situation. We're both the same age. We grew up in the same era. You have older siblings, just like I do, and so, you know, that gave us an opportunity for them to introduce things to us.
Right.
That's why Star Wars is available to me, you know.
Yeah. I guess I got lucky because I have 2 older sisters, and they're really into New Kids on the Block, and that kind of skipped me. So.
Super lucky.
I got really lucky.
You were super lucky.
But actually, one thing with having 2 older sisters, and just to pivot off Star Wars a bit, with Superman, the reason I got into Superman was because of them. So there was a show, a lot of people might remember this from the 90s, called Lois and Clark. It was with Dean Cain as Superman and Terry Hatcher, which a lot of people know as Lois Lane.
Yeah.
And it debuted in like 91 or something. I'm like 3. And it's that series was kind of revolutionary for Superman because it concentrated on their relationship. It was a relationship show. Yeah. It was like a CW drama, you know?
But it didn't have a whole lot of Superman.
It did.
It did? Okay, I can't remember. I do remember watching it, though, as a kid. I just don't remember a lot of it.
Right. He's in the suit a lot, but the primary focus is always a relationship. So it's like, to me, I think that's what appealed to my sisters. And then since I'm younger, I'm watching what they're watching, right? And so that's what really got... It wasn't Christopher Reeve Superman. It wasn't, some of the 80s films. It was Lois and Clark, New Adventures of Superman.
Awesome.
And basically, because of that, I then started researching more into the character, getting into the comics, and so on and so forth. So it was all because of the sibling, just like with you and your brother introducing me.
Yeah.
So, thanks to the siblings, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could be a Trekkie.
Yeah, we all could. We wouldn't be friends.
Don't kill me, Trekkies. I love Star Trek too.
We enjoy Star Trek.
I really enjoy it. Don't sound the same though. So with Star Wars, what was like a character? Let me do a caveat with this. Han Solo is probably most people's favorite character in Star Wars, and maybe is yours as well. Is there another character that stood out at all that you really like? Was it Skywalker? Or?
Yeah, no. So obviously, I think everybody's first favorite character, if you don't know what you're seeing or what's going on, is Boba Fett. The bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Right? He's cool. He's got the coolest uniform in the entire movie series. Except for Vader, right? But he's the bad guy, so you can't like the bad guy when you're a kid, right? Right. So, yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of the Star Wars toys personally. Most of them were my brother's, but I had a Boba Fett. I had some of the battleships and some of the other space shuttles and things, but I had a Boba Fett. That was a big deal for me to have. But then later, as you become a little bit older and you start understanding things a little bit better, you start understanding story and things like that, you start paying attention to who characters should be, the characters you really do enjoy. Obviously, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo,
Princess Leia,
and then we've got the new ones. I really love Rey and Poe and Finn. I mean, I can't really put a favorite on them.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I mean, it is an ensemble.
Yeah,
piece.
you have to have the entire cast to portray the storyline. I will say, like, outside of Star Wars, I love Mark Hamill.
Yeah, well, he's just funny.
He's just so funny. If you follow him on any social media, he is hilarious.
And he makes a great Joker. And,
he does, yeah.
You know, he's just a great person to follow on that stuff. Is there kind of a Let me rephrase this. With Vader, iconic character, probably one of the greatest villains in at least 20th century film, right?
Yeah.
When you were a kid watching Vader, what did you think of him? Was it something that was scary to you when you're 4 or 5?
No, and I've never really thought of it this way, so I don't have a direct answer to it. But no, it wasn't scary. Vader wasn't scary. I mean, he was intimidating.
Yeah.
But every story has to have a bad guy, a good guy, and a bad guy. So I understood that there was supposed to be a bad guy, and it was the guy with the red lightsaber, not the blue lightsaber. They made it real obvious for us to watch.
Yeah, and then obviously the green lightsaber was in return. Mm-hmm. So which one's better, blue or green?
Oh, it doesn't.
Hey. Putting you on the spot.
Don't get me started on canon versus legend. There's different reasons for different color lightsabers, and I can't go into that in this show because that's a debate based on canon versus legend, and Disney has created canon, so anything prior to Disney is considered legend. Okay. And so if something falls under legend and you stick to it, like I do in some cases, I get into some pretty heated arguments about Star Wars.
So since we don't want to be here for 50 minutes, I gotta take that question. All right. So they're both equal.
Yeah. No, they are. But, okay, so just in general, the lightsaber color is based on the kyber crystal that you obtain on your journey through the kyber crystal caves.
Okay.
So the crystal comes to you, essentially. So it's not that I picked a green one or I picked a blue one. The blue one means like honor and strength. So that one comes to you if you represent honor and strength. Right. The green one, I can't remember what the green one represents, but whatever it represents, if that's what you internalize, then that's what color comes to you.
Gotcha.
Red is hate and anger. Right. So and you have to take a crystal. And you take the dark force, and you basically pound it into the crystal, and you make it red. You don't find red; you make red.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. Okay, so that's like the journey that all the Sith Lords go on.
The Sith Lords would take the crystals from there if they were a Jedi before, just take their crystal and make it red.
Oh, I see.
Or if they would obtain a crystal and just make it red. They didn't have to go on the soul-searching journey like the Jedi did.
Okay.
The Jedi went to the caves and did their soul-searching journey.
It's basically natural versus kind of artificial.
Correct.
Right?
Now, that falls under legend.
Okay.
Now.
Okay.
So, under canon, which is since Disney purchased it, the red crystals are artificial. They're not real kyber crystals.
Gotcha.
They were manufactured in a machine shop. So the green and blues, those are real kyber crystals. Same story. They go get them out of their journey, but the red ones are made.
Okay.
By the Sith, by the Empire. They just build them.
Okay, so we don't want to get into the debate between the two.
No.
But I will say this. So Star Wars is a newer franchise than something like DC Comics and Marvel Comics, right? Relatively 40 years or something.
Yeah.
Obviously, with comics, they go through transitions all the time. So comic readers are used to like, this is canon, this isn't canon, and now the thing that was previously canon is back to being canon, and it's all confusing and ridiculous, and then there's an event to reset everything, and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
With Star Wars, this is kind of a new thing, right? To have something was canon for so long, and now they changed it. How do you, again, not to get into the debate of it, how do you feel about that?
I'm on the fence about it. I mean, I was not upset that Disney bought any of the Star Wars franchise. I felt it gave Star Wars an opportunity to grow, as we've seen, and as we've all been able to entertain ourselves with. Yeah. So I'm really happy about this growth. My concern is after I found out about legend versus canon and this big divide. At the same time, it makes sense that they've done it. Because when Lucasfilms owned it, they would sign contracts and allow people to write a book about Han Solo. So just Joe Schmo writer could write a Han Solo book and not have to reference anything from previous books or from the movie, or didn't have to bring it together. So there could be a Han Solo adventure out there that does not follow the storyline of everything else.
Right.
So this new canon, Disney-owned based canon, allows us to kind of actually finite things down to a more precise era.
Right. And that is similar to comic runs. Someone comes in, so you have something like with DC, the Silver Age, where basically writers can throw anything at a wall and see what sticks, and have Superman doing ridiculous things like towing planets and all this fun, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense. Nothing sticks together, right? His powers fluctuate and all this stuff. And then you have writers and teams and publishers, or that era, where they try to make it consistent throughout all the runs of that era, essentially. Yeah. And so it sounds like, again, Star Wars is following that kind of comics trend. And really eventually, maybe Disney or whoever else owns it is going to come back and just throw everything away again.
Yeah, it could happen down the line. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody decided something like that. But right now, I mean, if you're reading any of the books that are coming out post-canon, then we get, in the very beginning, just past the cover page, is a list of the books in the order. Oh. And in the order of the books, they also put the name of the movies. So, like, A New Hope will be at the top, or
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah,
Phantom Menace.
Exactly. It allows it lists the movie as along with the book titles, so it helps you kind of understand where in the timeline the book falls between the movies.
See, that would be very helpful.
It's super helpful. Yeah, right. It's super helpful right now because the books follow. Like, I'm reading Bloodline, and that's a Princess Leia story.
Okay.
It's actually a Senator Organa story. So post the Empire falling.
Right.
So that but I know that because I'm a fanatic. But if you're just a Star Wars lover, then you would like to have that little timeline at the beginning. It helps me too, because I don't know which books are written, and then they have a list of books that are coming out.
It's even if you're a super fan, it's almost impossible to keep track of any of this stuff.
Sure.
Like, literally with Superman comics, you have Action Comics Superman, you have the Super Son storyline, you have kind of one-offs, you have Elseworlds Tales. Like, you could have 5 different Superman books all at once.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll connect on one issue and then disconnect on another.
And that's why when we went and saw Death of Superman and The Reign of Superman, I had those questions because I didn't understand, was there a dedicated timeline, or did those two movies stand alone, or anything like that?
Right, and that's true. So you have the comics, and then you have the movie universe as well, that kind of follows the same kind of path that the comics do. You have the DC animated, that was there for 20 years.
And then you get the live-action movies, too.
Then you have the live-action movies on top of that. And as a Superman fan, and it was interesting when we were talking about Star Wars and kind of reading the books that tie in the timeline, because honestly, some of my favorite Superman stories were actually one-offs, and I would have liked to see a timeline. So one-off here, and you have a timeline, or a break into that, and then another one-off, and then a break, and then another one-off. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I tend to buy them in volumes because it's just easier reading. Like
sure.
That. Otherwise, you're buying one per month, and it's just kind of sucks.
Right.
So honestly, with me, the first, other than Lois and Clark, my first comic, and everyone's going to roast me for this, was actually the wedding issue.
Oh.
So they took Lois and Clark, and then in the film, after season 2, I believe, they get married.
Okay.
And then they tied in, because they want to make money, this big event wedding. Lois and Clark finally get married. Because in their, at that time, 60-year history, they had never gotten married. Yeah. In fact, in their 60-year history, I don't think she ever knew who he was.
Oh, okay.
Except for, film. I'm talking comics, but except for film. Books, so this was like a big deal at the time. And I picked it up. I think I still have it at my parents' house somewhere, like wrapped.
I'm sure it's worth something.
Yeah, like $5.50 or something.
Oh.
Tree fitty, maybe.
Tree fitty.
Tree fitty. But yeah, and then, in the late 90s, as I got older, there was Batman the Animated Series, which a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah.
Superman the Animated Series, which is one of my favorites.
I didn't watch that one much.
You should watch it. It's really good.
Yeah.
And then they had some great comic runs, too. They had Birthright, which was actually early 2000s. That's my favorite Superman comic. They had Mark Waid's, I'm blanking on it now, Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come is like Shazam's in it. It's like a future story. So basically, it was 90s that really solidified my love of this character. And now with the movies, man, where do I start with this? WB just doesn't really know what they're doing with the character, and they haven't for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because he's such an interesting, integral character. You would think they would be able to do it.
Yeah.
He is a hard character to write for if you don't like Superman. He is an easy character to write for if you love the character. My personal opinion.
All right.
And so that's where I think people struggle. Is a lot of people don't really grow up with him as their main guy. Mm-hmm. So you have to start there, and then interesting stories come from it. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've got one more thing I want to throw in there, and it'll follow a question to you. Maybe you can answer it the same way. But
sure.
So for me, Star Wars, it opened up all movies, like the entire world of entertainment and movies to me, because I became enthralled with the actors who played the characters. I started learning about set design. I started learning about cinematography. I started watching the behind the scenes. Like, I've never watched behind the scenes before Star Wars, and so at that point I realized that it was somebody's job to make these movies. It was somebody's job to write it. Somebody just painting. Somebody's job is to paint the sets. I mean, like, things like that. It just blew my mind that was an entire world,
right?
Which is the movie magic world. People go out and they have careers and they do these jobs. I don't know if that's something that happened for you, especially since yours was a TV show, which could definitely have opened that door, but also being the comic book,
Yeah, I mean, I think my primary entry, like I said, was a TV show, and then those animated shows. So that was my primary gateway, and then I got into the comics a little bit later, right after that. But it goes to show that the time that, again, filmmakers and animators put into these characters really goes a long way, because that's how you hook a kid at a young age.
Right.
Generally speaking, if you're in the 90s, you're watching Saturday morning cartoons, or after school cartoons.
Right.
That's what we did.
That's what we did.
Eating
that was the
cereal.
90s.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. So this is your gateway.
Right.
And then the comics, you're like, oh, there's more information about this character? Let me dive into what's going on with them right now. Except for Superman Red and Blue. Terrible. Never.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't torture yourself like that. So that is... So kind of liking the movie magic aspect of things is important, but it comes down to just really enjoying who the character is for me. Because ultimately Superman is important to me because of who he is as a character, which is a little different than saying the universe overall that he inhabits is interesting to me. I've often said to people when I was just talking about Superman that if he moved to Marvel Comics and just him, and everyone else at DC say Batman, Wonder Woman, all that, I would just start reading Marvel. Like, I like
you just need Superman.
I like all the other characters a lot. I like Batman. I like Wonder Woman. I love Green Lantern. I love Flash. I love the whole Justice League. But he is the central point.
Right.
And without him, the rest of it doesn't work to me.
Yeah.
Or at least not as well.
Sure.
So
I feel like Batman's the only primary standalone.
Well, we disagree.
Why not? I mean, he's been through so much. I mean, his story, his movies, his comics. I think
he can stand on his own, but so can Superman. You know. And for me, if Batman moved to the Marvel universe, I would still be at DC. It's just he's not as important of a character to me. And ultimately, it's stories where they examine Superman's character, either in comics, in television, or film, that are the best ones. Yeah. That's what I hope WB gets right with the next movies. You can build this world, but if you don't have the character right, then it all falls apart.
Yeah.
So,
So, here's another question for you. I'll answer for my end first.
Sure.
But so Star Wars for me, it's not another aspect of it that brings me into it is, and you've said this many times with your reviews, is do I want to be there? Do I want to be in that universe, or do I want to be in that location? For me, I want to be in that science fiction universe. I want to be, flying in a space shuttle across the universe with my friends, and following an adventure of some sort. But in reality here, what Star Wars means to me is that it's a consistency. It's something that's always the same, but it's there for you every single time. that I watch it, you know, I'll maybe catch something new I haven't caught before. But when I hear that music come on at the intro, you know, you just kind of melt back into the, you know, the alternate reality that is Star Wars, and I just let it engulf me and bring me in.
Right. I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing with what George Lucas did with it, is that he really created this whole universe. And again, it starts out galaxy far, far away a long time ago. I'm sorry I messed it up, guys, but yeah.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Yes. And so you don't know. We never get any. There's no context given. It's just, this is somewhere else. It's a fantasy world. Dive in.
Yeah.
And starting with that epic John Williams score was a stroke of genius.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it brings you in immediately. And it's, I can't think of many other franchises that really do that. That automatically bring you in like that.
Right. That just engulf you. Just carry you into it just so hard.
To that world.
Yeah.
Because, so here's a brilliant thing about Star Wars for me, again, as someone who doesn't follow it closely. Especially with the ones that I really love, like Empire and Return of the Jedi especially. I didn't feel a need to know all the details on the characters. I didn't need to know the backstory of everyone. I didn't need to know where this villain comes from. Where does Darth Vader come from?
Right.
We learn that. We uncover his story through the first trilogy. But it grabbed me already.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's kind of the great thing, too, is like they told the story from the middle.
Right.
They started with Luke instead of Anakin.
Right.
You know, I mean, how crazy is that?
That it really is amazing what he did with that. And in episode 4.
Right. Yeah. And it said it too.
Right.
1977. This is episode 4.
Right. And people are like, what? Like,
what?
Where's 1? And that's so right. And it's pretty amazing. And the prequels, you know, everyone has opinions on that, but I'm normally not someone who likes prequels, but the idea of having a prequel for Star Wars made sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, so that just goes to show you the kind of, the scope, the scale, the epicness of this adventure.
Yeah, and the forethought. Oh my gosh, it's just insane.
I mean, he thought this out.
Yeah, I mean, he was dreaming of Star Wars in high school and college.
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he was working on this. This has been in his head like his entire life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible to come up with all of that. All those characters, all those worlds, all those names.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's still more I need to learn about it overall.
Yeah.
I love it. It's just not, not something I know much about. So, is there any other kind of thing you want to discuss with Star Wars, your background with it, or touch on?
No, I think that covers most of everything, the origin of my Star Wars story.
yeah. I think so. Basically, it comes out of this for both of us.
Yeah.
Our siblings did this to us.
Yeah. They helped a lot.
Yeah.
They sure did.
It's their fault that we're nerds, basically.
Yeah.
So, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. This was episode 6, Meet the Porgs. We'll probably do similar things like this in the future. And we'll also be reviewing Captain Marvel. And you're looking at me like we're not.
No, we are. I'm just waiting for what else. You have your thumb up like we got a whole list coming. I don't even know what the next episode is.
That would be number 7. It comes after 6. So we have Captain Marvel. We have Shazam, the original Captain Marvel. So those will probably be our next 2 episodes.
Shazam is DC.
It is. Yeah. So there's Captain Marvel. Marvel comes out this Friday, March 8th. Then a month later, April 5th, Shazam, who used to be called Captain Marvel, comes out.
I must have missed that somewhere. So I went to the museum. So I went to the Pop Culture Museum in Seattle, and they had a special traveling exhibit, which was Marvel.
Okay.
And so I got to read about all the origin of Marvel and it's where it came from and how it got started, and it even touched base on DC and kind of the battle between the two, for the market of comic books. So I guess I understood that. I thought that Captain Marvel was the first superhero, but I believe that he was origined from Marvel Comics.
So in terms of which one came first, Captain Marvel, now Shazam, from DC did come first. So he had that title before. Oh. But then DC and Marvel got into some legal battle between them because I think Marvel was named Timely Comics and they had a similar character, and DC... There's a whole legal story about it. I bet a book could be written about it. Basically, DC said you can have the name, essentially, and they gave it away to Marvel. I think only like a decade ago. It was pretty recent.
Oh, wow.
and now they just went with Shazam as a secondary name. So
that's interesting. So I have seen the memes on Facebook and social media about like Captain Marvel versus Shazam and who came first. I guess I didn't understand that.
Those will be the next 2 reviews, so look for those. Follow us on social media. We're at the Porgcorner on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, interact with us. Ask us questions. What's your favorite Star Wars film? What's your favorite DC character? What's your favorite film in the DC universe? It could go from all the way back to Adam West to DCU. So let us know. Until next time, guys. Peace.